There's been no surprises at the fact that we're going to be getting a new Nintendo console sometime this year. Wait, next year? I have to wait another year for the next Nintendo console? The writing has been on the wall for quite a while now. A lot of the exclusives that already exist on the Switch right now, they're relatively smaller projects like remasters or spin-offs, and the console's just aging at a point where a lot of games are starting to feel quite compromised when it comes down to visuals and performance. I'm feeling really excited for the Switch 2 and what it can do, but I want to talk about my hopes and fears for what Nintendo might do with their next console. They are easily and by far the most unpredictable platform holder of the big three. You never know what they might have up their sleeve with a new console, and that's what makes their system so unique. Whereas with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, we expected those consoles to improve upon the previous generation with power and speed front and center. One of my biggest hopes for the system is that it's going to be an iterative upgrade over the current Switch. Nintendo tends to have that formula of having a console that's a revolutionary upgrade and changes the industry to the point where they've set the benchmark for what a console can do. Let's take the Nintendo Wii for example. It was obviously far weaker than the PS3 and the Xbox 360. It was notable enough they didn't really support HDMI, but what set it apart was its motion sensing capabilities. Nintendo designed that console in a way that would appeal to everyone, most importantly, people who just didn't pick up a controller at the time. That strategy paid off for Nintendo because they had long realized that trying to chase power, it doesn't necessarily work. They had learned from the N64 and the GameCube. Those are two consoles that were very powerful for their time, but they underperformed against the PS1 and the PS2 for a wide variety of reasons. The N64, it was difficult to develop for. It also used cartridges versus CDs, and its library was limited because of it. The GameCube, it had a perception problem from the get-go, like where it was seen as a kid's toy, whereas the PS2 was seen as a futuristic system for everyone. And Nintendo realized something had to change, and it worked with the Wii. Nintendo released their next console, the Wii U, and it built on everything the Wii did right, but it had its own innovation, the gamepad. And the gamepad was quite a mixed bag. It was a concept that just largely didn't work with the vast majority of games, and even Nintendo's own games just didn't really use it in a meaningful way. A key problem with that console was messaging, and it came out at a time when the majority of the Wii's audience, the casuals, they already bailed from that console. They moved to mobile gaming. Those who already had the Wii thought, is it a new console or an add-on for something that I already have? With that out of the way, whilst there are some parallels, I still think the Switch 2 is coming in with an incredibly stronger position than some might think. The Switch is like slowing down in overall sales, but it's not hit rock bottom. We've got to consider that. It's still an extremely successful console nonetheless. It's lasted far longer than any previous Nintendo home console has ever done, and it's got the support of both the core and casual gamer audiences. And I do somewhat fear that they might try a new feature that's not going to land as well with everyone, but because this console was built on how successful the Switch was, I think they might not even do something like this. It like somewhat like with the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, like a transition like that would be fine. I would say though that we shouldn't really give Nintendo any ideas, right? But then again, it's kind of a given because Nintendo's already finalized this console and features at this point. I mean, it's just minor things that you gotta figure out in the months to launch. All it needs to do is to do everything the Switch does right whilst improving on those key features that made the console great in the first place. I don't even mind if they're going to use an LCD screen over an OLED, but if it means we're getting a bigger screen and it keeps the price of the console at a reasonable one at that. Nintendo's always been about selling consoles at a profit from day one, and if it means sacrificing one feature, then I'm fine with it. Now the next thing I want to talk about is power, and you know that power is such a contentious point to discuss when you see it over your Twitter timeline. People were freaking out about the Switch 2 being just as powerful as a PS4. They were scared that it's never going to touch their current consoles in both visuals and performance. But let me tell you, a Switch 2 being as powerful as a PS4 Pro in docked mode does not sound so bad when you consider this. The same PS4 that gave us fantastic games that still look fantastic today, like Uncharted 4 and Spider-Man. The same PS4 that, as of right now, is still managing to hold up visually well a decade on, and with relative ease in comparison to its predecessors. The same PS4 that's still getting like a lot of the biggest releases out there today. I don't see anyone talking about this, but haven't we given the thought that diminishing returns in visual fidelity might be beneficial to the Switch 2 in time? Have we not realised that in the industry's push for photorealism, the gap still appears to be decreasing at this point? This might play to Nintendo's advantage so much more when you consider the fact that it's probably going to be as powerful as a PS4 Pro, when it will most likely have the superior upscaling solution in DLSS. DLSS was a game changer in that it drastically improved game performance on PC. When I'm playing something on PC, will I want superior performance out of my graphics card? Yes! If there's a DLSS option, then I'm all down to get as many frames as possible. It helps that it will get Nintendo onto the performance ladder, even if it doesn't quite match up to the PS5 and Series X. Maybe it will get close to the Series S, but at the very least, getting those games to run well, especially third-party releases, that's important. I can't lie though, the biggest fear that I have in this category is if Nintendo just skimped on aspects of the hardware that comes to really affect the Switch 2's overall performance in the long term. The Switch's biggest problem right now is that it just doesn't have enough memory bandwidth. It just doesn't have enough headroom to push all those demanding effects on screen. Boosting it is one thing, but giving it enough RAM or headroom in that aspect is another. It's the difference between games running well or falling short of their performance target. There was an article that came up a while ago speculating that the Switch 2 might have 8GB of RAM, which puts it in line with the last gen consoles at least, but I feel that something like 12GB might be better for keeping it at a reasonable level in the long term. RAM is cheap these days, and I don't think Nintendo should be limiting themselves to 8GB if it means that they want longevity for their next console. Now here is where the exciting part comes in, and that is games. It's no secret that Nintendo, they're saving all of their best and biggest games for their next console. The Switch is a fantastic example of how great games make a great console, and the fact that they were releasing bangers month after month since the Switch released in 2017 is a testament to its overall success as a console. Assuming that Nintendo keeps this consistency going for the first year of the Switch 2's lifespan, we're likely to have a killer app in one of the 3D Mario games, like a sequel to Mario Odyssey, and possibly Metroid Prime 4 releasing around this time, or maybe like a Pokemon spin-off. But whoever else, who knows at this point? It also means that third parties that were hesitant to release games on the Switch because of its hardware, they won't really need to worry because they can release it just fine on the Switch 2. Like the Switch 2, in terms of its power, it's similar to a PS4 to a PS4 Pro. A lot of people also made a fuss about games like Persona 3 Reload, a blast to play by the way, and Metaphor with Fantasio skipping the Switch whilst they got a PS4 version. Keep in mind that those games were made with the PS4 as a lead development platform, and porting those to Switch 2 should be no problem whatsoever. Whereas if you were to try and port those games to the current Switch, you'd be spending far more development time trying to make those games work on an aging system. Even for live service games, imagine those games running much better on Switch 2 compared to its predecessor. Fortnite on the current Switch as an example, it's easily the worst version to play on console. It's got pared back visuals, a 30 FPS cap that is a cardinal sin for a fast-paced multiplayer shooter. But with the Switch 2, those games would be running so much better at 60 FPS, and assuming Nintendo might pull it off, it's just hoping at this point, maybe 120 FPS, but I might just be too optimistic about it. But honestly, what's my biggest fear about games on the Switch 2? I'm going to be real here and say that their handling of backwards compatibility is what's got me a little concerned here. Nintendo has done it well with their handhelds back in the day, like with the DS and the 3DS, and it has more than enough room to improve with their next console, but they've been super silent on the matter, and the only things that do support the idea of backwards compat at least being supported is the fact that Nintendo, they've got Nvidia working with them again with the Switch 2, alongside Nintendo accounts being kept for the next console. Preservation and accessibility, they're important, and allowing everyone to play with their Switch library with a much better experience on a newer console, it's a good way forward. This is the difference between coming out of the gate swinging and making a huge fumble from the get-go. Backwards compatibility also allows more people to discover games that might have missed out before So there's an even big advantage with this as well. I'd admit it's the reason why I got a PS5 at launch and an Xbox Series S and an X afterwards, to catch up on those games that I missed out on back then. If the Switch 2 has backwards compatibility, it's an automatic day one alongside whatever game it's launching alongside. Not to mention I can catch up on the Switch games I missed out on too over the years. And please Nintendo, I know this has been such a requested feature, but please add themes and menu music to the Switch 2. Seeing the same background after all these years feels super tiring. At least with the Xbox, I can customize my background, and with the PS5 you get the nice game splash screen music. Give me both, Nintendo, you can do it. And that is the end of this video. What features and games do you want from the Switch 2? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.